Hey, Laura again. Welcome to day 3 of the Cassidy and Kids Cassidy Sew-Along, sponsored by Stone Mountain & Daughter Fabrics. Today, we're just working on sleeves. That's pretty much it. We're going to work on a standard sleeve and attaching it to our bodice, as well as the fun open sleeve with the tie. We're going to get that all set and ready to go. Let's do it. Okay, here we are. It is sleeve day. So we're gonna start out with the standard sleeve, then we'll add a ruffle, and then we'll do the tie sleeve, okay? So the first thing we're gonna wanna do, excuse me. So let's grab our sleeve. This is a short sleeve. The construction does not change if you're doing a long sleeve or 3/4 length. It's all the same. Okay, and it's the same, additionally it's the same starting out if you're doing a ruffle or a bell sleeve. So this is what your sleeve will look like. So what we need to do is we need to fold our sleeve piece right side together from the short end to short end, so, or long end, depending on the sleeve you've chosen. All right, so there's this. So here are 2 sleeves, right sides together. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stitch across here and I'm gonna stitch across here. Now I don't know if I said it on yesterday, but I'll say it again if I did, or for the first time if I didn't. We're using a 3/8 inch seam allowance unless otherwise noted. All right, so I'm gonna do this at my serger and I'll be right back. Here we are, I've got my sleeves. What I wanna do now is grab some clips. Whoa, because we want to, I've got too much junk in my clip container. We need to quarter our sleeves and then we'll quarter our sleeve openings as well, okay? Okay, so our sleeves are quartered. Now we're going to quarter our bodice, or not our bodice, our sleeve openings, but we're going to turn it wrong side out. All right, so I'm going to put a clip at the side seam and I'm going to put a clip at the shoulder seam, and then I'll meet those to find the quarter points. All right, now let's do the other side. All right, now what we need to do, I've got the front bodice up, okay? This is the neckline. You can see that's the front, and we've got the seam, and the neckline on the back bodice is higher, and you've got that seam from our neckband, so that's how you know it's the back. But I've got the wrong side of the front bodice facing up. There we go. Now what we need to do is we need to find the notch on our pattern or on our sleeve piece for the front. Now we cut notches to show us which was the front and which was the back. So we just need to find that notch. And I can see I've got my clip over the notch here. So what needs to happen is that piece, let me do this. That section of the sleeve needs to be this is the right side. So this right side of this section of the sleeve needs to be right side together with the front bodice, the arm opening of the front bodice. Does that make sense? So we have the side seam here and the side seams will match. So I know that this piece needs to go on this side because this is the front and this is the front, okay? So your bodice is wrong side out, your sleeve is right side out, and you're doing that. Words are not my friend this morning. You're doing that because you need them to be right sides together when you sew them, okay? So I know this is the front of the sleeve because I have marked it. So now I'm just going to open up the sleeve opening and I'm gonna shove the sleeve in there, and then I'm gonna match up, it's super simple, match up all of my clips. So I've got my side seam and my sleeve seam, those will match up. And then I jump up to the top, so that would be the shoulder seam and the center of the sleeve, which is here. And then you'll just match up the other quarter points. And then you'll repeat that with the other sleeve. All right, after this, after I get done clipping here, I'm gonna head to my sewing machine or my serger. You can use a stretch stitch. You could even use a zigzag stitch if you like, but I'm gonna use my serger and I'm going to attach these sleeves to my bodice. Okay, let's get our pressing mat. Let's turn our bodice right side out. All right, and I'm just gonna press these sleeves. All right, so if you're just doing a standard sleeve and you're not adding a ruffle or a bell or whatever, you are just going to hem this sleeve now. You're going to turn it to the wrong side, turn your raw edge to the wrong side 1/2 inch, and using a cover stitch or a stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch or even a twin needle, you're going to top stitch around that, and then you're done with your sleeves. But for us, we're not leaving it here. We're going to add a ruffle. So let's work on that. Now, if you've not cut out your ruffle or your bell piece, now is the time to do it. You can either use the pattern piece or you can use the chart on page 28 that will tell you whether you're doing a short sleeve ruffle, a 3/4 sleeve ruffle, a 3/4 sleeve bell, or a long sleeve bell. All right, so we're just doing the short sleeve ruffle. So we have 2 ruffles here. All right, and I'm going to take each of these. This is just like we've done with bands in the past, and I'm going to lay them out. Okay, 1 for each sleeve. Okay, and I'm going to fold them short sides together. All right, so not long sides together. We're not doing like a tube or a hot dog, so it's just like this. And then I'm going to head to my serger or sewing machine using a stretch stitch or my serger, and I'm going to stitch down the short ends so that we can make an actual tube. We've got our 2 ruffle tubes, is what I like to call them. Okay, so we have 2 options here. What we're going to do now is we're going to hem this ruffle. All right, so what you can do, technically speaking, I'm not saying I encourage it, but you could not hem it at all because we're using knits. Most knits don't fray. You could just, you know, make sure your tails are tucked in and whatnot, and leave it unhemmed. But there are 2 other options for hemming. I do encourage hemming. You can take the bottom raw edge and you can fold it up 1/4 inch and then fold it up another 1/4 inch, which totally hides the raw edge, and you can sew around. Or you can just fold it up 1/2 inch and sew around. I'm actually just going to sew it up 1/2 inch, and we're just going to fold it up and press it at 1/2 inch. Now you could pin or clip this to keep it in place, but I'm not going to. My pressing just kind of does the job, and you can see what we got here. All right, I'm going to move that to the side, and I'm going to repeat that with my other piece. Okay, just like our hemming of the sleeves, if we did that, we're going to do the same kind of thing here. You're going to use a stretch stitch, a zigzag stitch, a twin needle, or your cover stitch, and you're going to top stitch around this sleeve or this ruffle. I'm going to use my cover stitch, and I'll be right back. All right, now it's time to gather. This is the same principle that we will use for the skirt. So if you're doing the ruffle or bell sleeves, this will be great practice for the skirt. So what we want to do is we want to go to our sewing machine using a long straight stitch. I'll probably do all the way up to a 5 as far as length. We're going to sew 2 lines of stitches around this top raw edge. The first one will be about 1/8 inch from the raw edge, and the second one will be about 1/4 inch from the raw edge. All right, so you want to make sure you leave tails at the end, thread tails at the end, so that you can pull those threads to make the gather. All right, so let's do that. All right, so here we are. We've got our 2 rows of stitches. No worries if it got a little wonky. No big deal. In fact, what I'm going to do is in the description box below and in the blog post, I will add links to different ways, different gathering methods. Now, I will tell you that I did multiple gathering methods for a sewing school video a couple years ago, and I did find this method, which everybody hates because it's kind of time consuming, especially if you're doing it on like a skirt. This still was the most effective and gave me the best gathers. So, just saying, all right? So now we have to gather our ruffle to be the same size as our sleeve. What's easiest for me is not having it laying down, like holding it in my hand, and then every now and then I'll go and check it. Don't yank, you just want it to glide through the fabric, and once you feel a little resistance, stop and pull, adjust those ruffles. Because what you don't want, and I've done this before, where you yank really hard and you break your threads, and then you have to take them out and re-sew them. Guiding, see how I'm doing that? Just grabbing and guiding them down the thread to more like try to even them out a little bit. It's hard to see. I mean, well, you have kind of have it in your own hand to like feel it, because you want the ruffles all over, not just in one spot. Okay, so now I've got a place to go here. So I'll pull here. There we go. All right, so what I do at this point is I grab all of my little tails. I have lined it up perfectly. I don't want it to make any changes. So I grab all the tails. These are the tails I pulled. You can see that they're long. These are the tails I didn't use, and I tie them together. I don't know if everybody does it this way, but this is what I do. It works best for me because I tend to break threads, and then I get so frustrated and like I'm never gathering anything ever again. And this just helps me. All right, and then I trim them off. Okay. Now what I'm gonna do, you can see that it's not evenly, the gathers aren't evenly dispersed. Like I've got no gathers here and a lot of gathers here. So I'm just going to pull them apart a little bit here and there and really get them evenly dispersed. And I feel like they look pretty good, all right? So that's what we have. Now we're gonna take our sleeve here, our ruffle, and we need to place it right sides together with our opening here. So that's where you're sliding it, that's where I would slide the sleeve through it, and I would match up those seams. And I'm just doing just a little bit of, don't yank on this, you will break the threads, but I'm just kind of getting everything evened out. I want it to fit perfectly, and you can see it actually really does. So I'm not pulling, I'm just firmly holding and just kind of doing this so the fabric adjusts on its own, like I don't have to do anything. Okay, so then we can still even out those gathers if we need to. If they got a little more wonky, that's okay. We just fix them. All right, so I'm going to give these a couple of clips. And then I'm going to do the other side. All right, so that's that one. Let's turn it around. We want to do the other side. Okay, sometimes it wants to turn under. Don't let it do that. Okay, you're the boss. Okay, now I'm gonna head to my sewing machine. You can use a stretch stitch or you can use a serger to attach the ruffle. So I'll open this up and I will, so using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, I'm gonna sew around the opening to attach my ruffle to my sleeve. All right, and I'll be right back. you can see my ruffles here. Now, what you can also see is they kind of want to like stick out here. Okay, this is where pressing is important. We want to press that seam allowance up, all right? Don't skip this part. This is important. So press that seam allowance. Notice I'm pressing from the inside, from the wrong side, and I'm pushing that seam allowance up. That's gonna smooth that out so you don't have a weird bump here. And then you're gonna head over to your sewing machine and using a stretch stitch, a twin needle, or you can use a cover stitch machine. You're going to top stitch around this to really kind of adhere or attach, I should say, that seam allowance to your bodice. Now let's see if that made a difference. Okay, it still wants to stick out, so top stitching is going to be helpful here, but you can see the difference between this sleeve and this sleeve. All right, so don't skip that. All right, now part of the problem can be that we've stretched our sleeve a little bit, this part of our sleeve, but that's okay. It'll work itself out. But make sure that you've pressed that seam allowance up. And it doesn't always want to stay there, which is also why top stitching is important. And there is that side. That's just a huge improvement as far as the finished look is going to be. Now you can see I've got a few of my gathering stitches showing here, and that can also prevent the stretch of your sleeve. So make sure that before you top stitch that you've taken out your what are they called? Gathering stitches. There it is. I'll find it. So take out your gathering stitches so that they're not seen, and you need a stretchy sleeve. So if it's not stretchy, it's going to be difficult to get it on and off. Mine's doing okay for the most part. So I'll have to go through and do that. But once you've done that, you can go and you can top stitch. All right, so there's our short sleeved ruffles. All right, let's set that to the side. So what we've done is we've done our regular sleeves and talked about hemming those. And we've done a ruffle sleeve, or this is the same method for a bell sleeve. So we've covered those. Now it's time to cover the tie sleeve, which is super cute. All right, so as we know, let me move my junk out of the way here. We had to cut 8 of these tie sleeve pieces. And this is because this sleeve is kind of fully lined. So we need 8. We needed 4 sets of 2. So there's 1 set in mirror images, right? There's 2 sets, here's 3 sets, and let me move my pocket out of the way, there's 4 sets. I'm gonna be real honest with you, this is the first time I've done the tie ones. So we will be learning together. I can't imagine it's going to be hard, we just have to pay attention to what we're doing. Oh, and I meant to say this about the ruffles and the bell sleeves. You can do these I sewed that ruffle onto the sleeve in the round. You can flat sew those as well, and there are instructions in the tutorial to kind of guide you along that. I just am very used to sewing in the round, so it's what I gravitate to automatically without even thinking. It's just what I do. So you could certainly do that in a flat sew, and the instructions are there to help you. But I'm jumping in the tutorial down to page 36 for the split sleeve with ties. Now, what it says is to match 1 set of 2 sleeves, right sides together, and sew around it with a stretch stitch at a quarter inch seam allowance, leaving the top end and the underarm open. So we're not going to sew here, and we're not going to sew here. We're going to start here, and we're going to come around like that, all right? And once I get done with this, I'm gonna head to my sewing machine, my regular sewing machine, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure these line up just so. And I am going to stitch starting here all the way around the curve, all the way around here, going slowly, especially once I hit these curves, because that can get a little funky. But all the way around here and across the bottom on all 4 sets. So let's get that done. All 4 of my pieces are done. Now, if you watch closely, you saw that my sewing machine really wanted to eat this fabric. It really struggled. But when I got to like this curve here, this tiny little curve here, that's where the biggest challenge was. Once I got around that corner, it was cake. So I took it really slowly, and I tried to get ahead of the eating kind of thing. I could tell when the fabric was wanting to, like, it was trying to pull the fabric in a weird way. So then I got in there and tried to fix it. That's what you were seeing, is what I'm trying to tell you. But it did really want to eat this fabric, and fortunately it did not. So all right, so now what I'm going to do, let me double check my instructions here. I'm going to trim my seam allowance. Okay, now we're going to turn each of these right side out. Now that we've turned all of these sleeve pieces right side out, we need to press them. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to carefully press each and every one of these sleeve pieces. Open up the shoulder right at that shoulder seam, and we're going to stitch one sleeve set to another along that shoulder seam for about a ½ inch. So it's not difficult, but you're just going to open that up, open each of those sleeve sections up, and then you're going to match them right sides together at that seam, that inside seam there, and then you're going to stitch down about a ½ inch. Okay, now let's just open that up, and you can see that we've got what resembles an actual sleeve. Now what we're going to do is we're going to match the open underarm edges right sides together. So we're going to match it at the seam and at the ends as well. And we're going to sew with a stretch stitch or a serger using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to press it open. And once we finish that, we can go ahead and top stitch from around the tie and up over the shoulder, and around the other tie and across the other hem. All right, now that we've got that sewn together, we can trim our threads. We can also turn everything right side out so we can really get a good look at what our sleeve with the opening and the tie actually looks like. Now I want to be sure to press all of my seams here just to get everything looking nice and clean. Now we're going to continue on just as we would any regular sleeve. We're going to get our bodice. We're going to turn it wrong side out. So the wrong side is up. We are going to quarter our sleeves just like we did the other sleeves. And we're also going to quarter our sleeve openings of our bodice. Once you've finished pinning all that together and matching all those quarter points, you're going to head to your serger or your sewing machine. You can use a stretch stitch or your serger, and you're going to sew the sleeve to your bodice. Now, when you're sewing, what you want to make sure is that your tails of your ties are out of the way. You don't want to accidentally sew through those. That would not be fun. Okay, so grab your pressing mat and turn your bodice right side out. We are going to take a good look at this and give it a nice press. Look how cute. I just love how this has turned out. It's a really nice looking bodice. The frustration of turning those ties right side out is totally worth it. It looks lovely. We are now ready for day 4 of our Cassidy and Kids Cassidy Sew Along, sponsored by Stone Mountain and Daughter Fabrics. I'll see you tomorrow.